Morning, everyone. We're just wrapping up chapter 8, and we'll get into chapter 9, Lord willing, and the handout was there. It's the same one from last week. There were a few there. Oh, okay. I don't know how many we'll need them. We'll see how many need one. How many need a handout? Yeah, here's an extra. I will. Not that I want you to try. Please come back. We are on page 17. Yeah, just wrapping up chapter 8 there. Look at verse, Peter's confession of the Christ, right? In Mark chapter 8, who do people say I am? What about you? You are the Christ, right? And then Jesus follows it up with a conversation about his death once again. And he's connecting the dots. This is who I am. You should know why I've come. He makes the fact that I'm going to die, but then rise again. They didn't comprehend what that all meant. And then you get into verses 34 and following. If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, follow me. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for a person to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a person give in exchange for his soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. There's a lot packed into that, again, about who Jesus is and what he's done, his death, his resurrection, his return. So on page 17, the question is, make the connection between verse 35 and Romans 1:16, along with John 15. Verse 35. Right? If anyone, forever wants to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for me and the gospel. Why does that connect with Romans 1:16, which is the theme of the book of Romans? I am not ashamed of the gospel because it is the power of God for the salvation of everyone. What's the connection there? Take a stab at it. So page 17 to the handout, Mark chapter 8.
Whoever loses his life will, in the gospel, save the people of Romans.
Okay.
So I tried to put my thoughts.
That's fine. Right, so again, how are we saved? Through the gospel, right? Paul makes that clear. I'm not ashamed of this gospel because it's the power source. It's what connects people to Jesus and gets them into heaven. And here too, if you're trying to find a connection to Jesus apart from the gospel, what's going to happen? You're going to lose your life, right? But whoever gets connected and stays connected to Jesus at all cost, what will happen? You'll be saved. Right? And so then John 15, 1-8, John 15, Jesus says, I am the wine country. I am the vine, you are the branches, right? So, and he emphasizes if you stay connected to him, you drink good wine, it'll be better for you. Like the Apostle Paul said to Timothy, settle your stomach with a little wine. Moderation. If you don't like wine, good grape juice. Just on a side note. All right, did you ever taste out of the barrels before it becomes wine?
Yes.
You know, there's like 3 stages to it, right? There's the really terrible stage. Then there's a medium prune juice stage. And then there's like the Welch's grape juice. Like, ooh, that's good. And it doesn't have the alcohol in it, so I mean, it's not there yet. So, right? God's given us a gift with grape juice, which then turns into something else. So the point, though, back here is, stay connected. Right? Apart from Jesus, we will lose our life. So then the next one, what is the answer to the questions in verses 36 and 37, and why is that the case? 36 and 37, what good is it for a person to gain the whole world and forfeit the soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for the soul? What's the answer? Nothing. And why is that the case? Because Christ has done it all. And what else? What can you gain in exchange for Christ? You can gain the whole world, but what's going to happen?
You're not going to have eternal life.
Yeah, you're not going to have eternal life. You're going to lose your soul. All that stuff burns up, right? It's like building your house on sand rather than on rock. And it may bring happiness, the things of this world, but it's for a moment, right? Then you're waiting for the next thing. That's why the Apostle Paul said in Philippians, I've learned the secret of being content. Whether well-fed or hungry, I still can be content. That peace that transcends all understanding. And that's something, again, we're on this side of heaven, we're always going to struggle with. We know where our true contentment lies, but Satan's always going to be there. Well, you're really content and this and that, right? He'll put that little bug in there. But by the grace of God, we can kick that thought process aside and realize, yes, we do have what we need. Maybe I don't have, the latest clothes or the newest car or whatever. But do I have what I really need? And by the grace of God, I can hold on to that. Ecclesiastes, right? I'll get to those comments in a moment. Ecclesiastes, what did Solomon say? Life without God is meaningless. Right? But how many people are living their life trying to search for happiness apart from God? All right, Steve.
If you gain all things in the world, what's still going to happen? You're going to die.
Right?
What's going to happen with it then? It isn't going to be yours.
Even the cryogenics people, right? If the end of the world comes, it's still not going to do them any good to have their body frozen until there's a cure, right?
I think the word ashamed kind of gets me that distractions come from the devil, the world, and your flesh. And these are the things he's warning us of. Don't get distracted. And you will be.
Right.
So how are you going to keep from being distracted? By keeping your eyes on Jesus. I mean, that's the only one you're going to keep. Otherwise, you're going to get devoured into hell.
Yeah, that's why like John 15 really drives that home point. Don't get distracted. And what's the way to not get distracted? Stay connected to the vine, right? And you will bear good fruit.
I was going to say, life is short, eternity is forever.
Right? Life is short, right? I mean, even Psalm 90, Moses, right? If you have the opportunity to live 70 or 80 years, great. But not everybody gets that. There was a reason why FDR set Social Security at the age he did. Because the average age was way under that, right? And even before that, right, the average age at one time used to be 37. What do you think of what people did for a living? Coal mining, right? I mean, we are blessed to live longer, which gives us an opportunity to do more things to the glory of God, while at the same time it also comes with, other things, more aches and pains per se. But even through those aches and pains, they can become a distraction from God. God, why? I've been faithful to you. Why am I going through these aches and pains? It's not dependent on our faithfulness. Thankfully, what is our life dependent on is His faithfulness to His promises, kept and still to be kept.
Nate's mom is 99. She didn't want to be here. Just praying, take me when I take me.
Yep.
She just, her mind is really almost gone. And she just,
God's keeping her here for your benefit. Let's divide that up amongst ourselves. How is this for David's?
Where his focus would have gone. She wasn't.
Right? Again, not to get too muddied up in that, but right, sometimes we don't always know, but God has His reasons, and sometimes it's not for the person who's ready to go, but it's for somebody else, right? And it might be a witness tool, or even like in the nursing home. Why does God keep some of those people around? Well, some people wouldn't have a job, and who knows who's going to be a witness as they go to family members, or a pastor comes by or whatever, and that CNA or the nurse or whoever hears about Jesus or another resident. So again, God help us see the other reasons that potentially could be there, and trust in Him. So again, the importance of truly staying on the focus of the meaning of life, because we see it more and more, right, in our day, how many people are distracted from the one thing needful. So what fact is mentioned in verse 38?
If you're ashamed of Jesus in this life, He'll be ashamed of you in judgment.
All right. So the fact is, He is coming back. And you mentioned, right, sooner or later you're going to die.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with your life in the meantime? And if you're ashamed of Jesus, and I got time to get back with Jesus later. Well, you don't know that. You can't play Russian roulette with your faith, but many people do. And so here's another reminder goes back to Romans 1, let us not be ashamed of the gospel, because really there is only one power source. There is only one way to salvation, and really there's only one way to live life that fulfills you with contentment and peace of mind and heart. Because some of the distraction comes in devil's temptation is because we are living lives that are not in line with God's word, and so he's good at picking that apart. And then it gets to the point of people ask, well, can Jesus even forgive me? And your answer is, yeah. But not everyone's going to say that, though, right? Not all Christians will say that to somebody. All of a sudden it becomes conditional. God's grace is not conditional. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 6 to 10. Anybody has that handy, we can... Thank you.
Since indeed God considers it just to repay with affliction those who afflict you, and to grant relief to you who are afflicted, as well as to us, when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven with His mighty angels in flaming fire, inflicting vengeance on those who do not know God and on those who do not obey the gospel of the Lord Jesus. They will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of His might, when He comes on that day to be glorified in His saints and to be marveled at among all who have believed, because our testimony to you was believed.
Thank you. So, what are some truths in there? There's quite a few things to unpack.
He gives relief to the troubled.
He gives relief to the troubled. And when might that relief come? It might not come till the end of time. What else does he remind us of? God is just. So what kind of justice does he have? How would you define his justice?
Hating your everlasting destruction.
All right. So in other words, what is real?
Well, you're going to go to hell if you don't believe in it.
H-E double toothpicks is real, right? Again, because we see it's relevant because you see those stickers on the back of windshields, cars, right? That says no fear of hell and so forth. People have disregard for life and for justice, God's justice. But he makes it very clear. Justice is, if you are away from me, do not believe in me, you're going to everlasting destruction. And how does that serve as a comfort to believers? How does that serve as a comfort to believers?
Our suffering on earth is short-lived.
All right, suffering is short-lived because we know the end's going to come, individually or collectively. But the fact that God's justice will condemn some people to everlasting destruction, how is that a comfort to believers?
We know the opposite is true. Heaven is real.
Okay, heaven is real too, right? So for us connected to Jesus, as he has said, you believe in me, you have eternal life.
Words that are that harsh should, cause us to run in the opposite direction toward God. Those are harsh words.
Those are harsh words, right? So I'm sorry.
Really defining words. They are going to happen.
Right? It is going to happen, right? So, and that's where it can be comforting in this sense.
Well, I am a sinner. If I believe in Jesus, he will forgive me and provide justice in that respect and let you, So there's the comfort is you know that you can be forgiven.
Because again, justice for us as believers, it's not that we've done anything to get right with him, right? It's what he has given to us through the gift of his Son. But in a sense of the everlasting destruction, how they can be a source of comfort to believers is knowing that someone may have gotten away with a crime or whatever here on earth, earthly justice, but they cannot escape God's justice. If you read through the early Psalms of King David, people scratch their heads and go, what is he saying? David's not saying, I want to seek revenge. He says, God, you hold people accountable, and you will get revenge against those who profane your name and so forth. David wasn't saying he wanted people to go to hell, but he's realizing there is justice in knowing that God is not blind to the injustices that are taking place in this world. So the comfort for us in believers is the fact that we know God is just. He doesn't treat us as we deserve. However, for those who turn their back on him, there is everlasting destruction. But he doesn't want that for them, so he's going to use every opportunity he can to bring them into a relationship with him.
All he's doing is keeping his promise. He promised that, and that I think that gives us very comforting.
Sure.
That if he promises that, he's going to hold to it. Guess what? He's promised us something we can hold to.
Right.
So we have the truth, and we have the assurance of God's love, unconditional love, by the way.
Yeah, so because he keeps his promises, we can be assured he's going to keep all of his promises. The ultimate proof of that is the Christmas, Good Friday, Easter.
So when he talks about eternal destruction and other places, eternal fire, whatever, I mean, I know, I believe it, but yet I go, I love God, and he's going to do that.
Well, it's a loving God, right? I mean, that's what people struggle with. How can a loving God allow even just chastisement, trials and tribulations now, and then he's going to send people to hell? I don't want a God like that. But again, God disciplines those he loves. He loves all people, and he's very upfront. You turn away from me, this is where you go. It's like we've said before, when this one guy was asked, well, why does God send people to hell? And his response was, we're by nature on our way to hell. God is the one who takes us off of that road to hell. But it goes kind of that concept again where people are basically good, so why's God got a problem with us?
Can you pretty much bank on that these people are going to be tortured forever?
Eternal suffering, what exactly is that going to be? I mean, you're going to be separated from God. You're going to be with Satan and all his minions. It's not going to be a piece of cake. Some people say, there's a country song, man, that talks about, there's always a country song. Hopefully this guy will play it backwards and he'll see the positives. But he says, he's talking about church people, and he says, how sometimes church people kind of look at you with those eyes of judgmental eyes. And he goes, if that's the kind of people in heaven, I'd rather be in hell. Well, again, you better play that backwards, so, right? So it is a real thing. And remember, James D. Kennedy questions were always valid because people did have a basic sense of heaven and hell. But as now you look at the Barna surveys, you have more and more people who don't believe in heaven or hell. They may believe in heaven yet, but they don't believe in hell. And so they don't care. And so that question about if you died today, where are you going to go? I don't care. That's what you're dealing with. Now, how do you get through to that? You keep planting seeds.
Pound that in people's heads and try to...
Right.
But it seems like it should.
Yeah, I mean, right? Jesus spoke softly and carried a big stick, right? I mean, he had the law, but he didn't come out to the adulterous woman and say, what were you doing? Right? He worked with her, right, to lead her, to see her error of her ways. And then there were some he just said, cursed be you to eternal fire. Thankfully, again, we're not the ones who are doing it. We're the messenger. And God help us be the messenger that's faithful. Psalm 1 reminds us of the importance of meditating on the word of the Lord day and night, again, so that we can stay connected. And the benefits of staying connected to the word. You're like a tree planted by streams of water. We know the benefits of water. And even something that's appears like it's dying, you give it some water and it comes back. So as long as there's breath in a person, connect them to the water of life. Right? But he also in Psalm 1 makes it clear that those who don't partake of his word, they are like chaff that the wind blows away. So even though we live in an apologetic society, and an apologetic church, not a defense apology, but we always feel sorry for what we say, especially the harsh things about God's law. That's one thing we cannot apologize for. Now, speak the truth in love, but we cannot apologize for what God says about lifestyles, what God says is sin. Like in the gospel for today, where does sin come from? And he gives some very clear examples: the sexual immorality, hatred, stealing, and so forth. That's all within us, and that needs to be condemned.
Well, sin is so watered down that it's 20 years from now we probably won't hear it completely. It's almost eliminated from most churches. Barely mentions sin, So sin has got to the point where it's nothing. It's just another word. The world's dictionary is going to eliminate sin. The Christian dictionary should eliminate why.
And thankfully, as long as God is in charge, and that'll be forever, like he said, my word will remain. And there'll be those peaks and valleys. Are we at the end? The Lord knows that. We simply go about and live our lives. Each day is a gift from God. We're one day closer to heaven, individually and or collectively. That's how we live our lives, not getting all caught up in packing up our things because it's the end times. We've been living in the end times since Jesus ascended, right?
But you ask somebody if they fear God. 99% of people say no.
Right.
Not the fear.
Right.
He's a good old guy upstairs. He'll take care of me. That's the basic mentality of the world.
Yeah, and so you pray, Lord, that somehow their heart will change and see the truth. And it goes back to the The Old Testament reading for today, Deuteronomy, what were the Israelites to do with the laws and decrees that God had given to them? Keep them and pass them on to the children and to your children's children. What sometimes has happened, unfortunately, in recent generations, we stopped passing on the truths to the next generation. Or, again, there are so many distractions out there that you pass on those truths that the next generation lost sight of them. Finally, again, give thanks to the Lord that you're still connected. And every opportunity that the Lord puts before us, whether we recognize it or not, may God give us the opportunity to live the life and share the hope that we have.
Don't send your kid to a secular college.
Then again, if your child is strong, they can be a great witness. Like I said last time, the study shows primarily if your children stay connected in their first year of college, they're pretty well connected through college and beyond. If they lose their connection that first year, it's pretty much unfortunate. Not impossible. So again, the importance of, but where does that start? I mean, these kids that are staying connected in college, they're already connected in high school. And we've also looked at, when are we losing kids? We're losing kids already in grade school. That's why they said, you know, if you teach Noah's Ark like a little cutesy story, that's what they think of what the Bible is, cutesy stories. When you got in school, you got them teaching about evolution using these terms, and they make it sound like this has got to be the truth. So we have to make sure that we teach the Bible as adult-like. I mean, truth. This is not just a story with little flannel animals up on a flannel graph. This is real stuff. Why did the flood happen? And there's evidence of the flood. Another lesson. Something further to think about. Is your love for God and for others conditional or unconditional?
It should be unconditional.
It should be.
Our lives, we put some conditions on things.
Okay? And so when it's unconditional, what might that be saying about our life? About us? When our love for someone or even for God is conditional, what might that be saying about me?
People can do anything to you and you're not going to get back at them.
You know, like, okay, we may not get back at people. Jesus did say turn the other cheek. He didn't say you couldn't defend yourself, but we're not to antagonize or aggravate the situation. Right? Like, what do they say about bullies? If someone bullies you, I mean, the more you give into them, the more they'll bully.
That's extreme.
Right. So if we are looking at God as being conditional or treating other people as conditional, what does that say about us?
That says we're not where we need to be spiritually.
Okay.
You said in your sermon today, it's not hard to love God and your neighbor. And even as you said those words, I was like, yeah, you're right, that shouldn't be hard. Man, sometimes that's really hard.
Right? So again, it's a reflection of what am I thinking about my relationship with God? If I'm thinking my relationship with God is conditional, then I'm missing John 3:16.
I'm judgmental.
Right. Yeah. So I need to. That's why the commandments are the way they are too, right? Focus your relationship, strengthen a relationship with God first and foremost, and here's how. And now you're in a position to focus that relationship with others. But if your relationship with God is out of whack, well, then our relationship with others is going to be conditional and judgmental. It's a fact of life. We're not going to change that, but we need to recognize it so it doesn't get the best of us, because pretty soon then we'll be looking at everybody with conspiracy theories instead of seeing them as fellow people Jesus died for. And the majority, unfortunately, are not realizing that he did that for them. So that's why he said, go into all the world, be lights, be salt and light. All right, a lamp is broken. Who pays for it?
Should be the one who broke it,
Okay.
but it often isn't.
Your husband, okay? Our lamp is broken. Can we pay for it? No. Thankfully, God has paid for it. Sin has been committed. Who pays for it? Yeah, we should, right? But again, we can't pay for it. Thankfully, God has through his son, Jesus. Again, it needs to be rectified, and thankfully it has been through Jesus. Who or what is your identity? You want to go back to something?
I just want to back up for a second. When you said that about that, who pays for, who pays for it. There's so many times that people, that I hear people say that bad things are happening to them, and it's because they don't have any forgiveness. They're all their fault. Instead of looking at it that it's already been paid for and move forward.
That's where we want to get people to, right? It's been paid for already, yeah. And so how could Jesus forgive me for that sin, or for that thought process?
They just, they think.
That's our human nature to reflect back on what we have to do, right? And then Satan will drive that home point as well. You have to do something. And how many human religions do the same thing? It's putting the focus back on you. I mean, even in the Catholic Church, right? You go to the priest for confession. What does the priest say you got to do? Right? You got the Hail Marys and you got to do some restitution. And then you might hear those words of forgiveness. So I mean, it's ingrained in us by nature, and then unfortunately the earthly church further ingrains that thought that forgiveness is not free and clear through Jesus. It's something that we have to earn. Yeah, that's a good point. Who or what is your identity? It kind of goes back to, what are we living for? Is it Jesus? And how do we reflect that? Is it our work? Is it our hobby? What is it, right? It's a good reflection question for us. And why does this matter? Again, we talked about contentment and satisfaction as we go through this life. Earthly status is fleeting in the things of this world. And where is there conflict on this? Well, again, in the world. The world's all big into status, right? We love titles. But again, as we've said, you don't need a title to do something. Versus being focused in the Bible, in our hearts, right? Again, if something needs to be fixed, and again, it's in your purview to fix it, can you do it? Even though you don't have the title? Okay. Like an outlet cover is cracked. Can you replace that outlet cover, or do you need to establish a committee first to determine, do we fix this broken outlet cover, and then who's supposed to fix it? And if somebody else fixes it, even though they're not on the committee that's supposed to fix broken outlet covers, should the committee be upset that someone took the time to fix that broken outlet cover? I mean, don't we get upset about the minute things, mundane things, and really souls are dying everywhere, but that we're not concerned about? I mean, the committee's in charge of making sure the outlet covers are fixed, but again, if someone fixes it on their own, great. And they didn't charge the church for it, it's even better.
Hold on. Donald.
And sometimes we gotta not always rely on the same people either. It kind of gets to that point of not only one person has to do the work. How do we train up the next generation if we keep going to the previous generation for the same things? It's a combination. We got to work together, but it can't. It's kind of, again, like you said, why don't those young ladies ever get involved in setting up for Advent supper? And they do it, and then the old ladies come in and say, you did it wrong. They're never going to volunteer again, and they may never show up at church again. So don't we feel good? We should. Where Jesus is not just a king, he is a king on a cross. What's the difference?
King can't save us.
An earthly king can't save us. He's a servant king. He didn't come just to be served. He came to serve. Right? So if he, the King of Kings, is willing to get his skin pierced, who are we to think we're above such? Thankfully, we don't have to have our skin pierced to do for the reason he had his skin pierced. You know, again, that's a humbling thought.
I know it may come about, or we're going to have to.
And martyrdom may come about.
Some Asian countries, this guy became Christian, and his whole family became Christian, and they're pretty satisfied when people found out about them being Christians, so they beat all the family, and burned his house, and people had to go off and find a different way they did not. Anyhow, boy, did that happen to one of us? Are you ready for that?
Yeah, the whole martyrdom thing, and I mean, Jesus points that out, kind of like the whole Columbine shooting years ago. Right?
And that's just one clip. I mean, there's 60,000 Christians killed in Nigeria.
Yeah, other countries. I mean, even Canada, right? Talking to a pastor who's got a call to the U.S. from Canada. I mean, Canada's very restrictive on religion. What pastors can or cannot say from the pulpit, and even establishment of churches. And like they say, what happens in Canada pretty soon makes its way to the U.S. And it already has happened, right? Those pastors in Houston who, in their sermons, spoke out against homosexuality, and they were arrested. They were freed, but they were arrested. Because, again, our media is being watched. Someone will pick it up. And the mayor of Houston at that time was very anti-God and anti-church. And so she had put these people out there to look at churches' websites, media, live streaming, and nailed these two pastors to set an example for watching. So, you know, this guy in Canada, you know, you still have to think about. You can come to the U.S. and not have that immediate pressure, while at the same time, yeah, Wisconsin's going to.
Hey, I don't know if Wisconsin is there. If they're.
Well, I'll just say this, right? So Canada has become its own district because, for many reasons, right? We're more in partnership with the church in Canada now. Just the way the political climate is for money exchange and policies and stuff. So it's just a different animal. So what you were saying, right? There comes a time when Christians in America will feel this more and more. It's already happening in North America, just not immediately right here, but it could come. That's why these words are still very applicable. And a good reminder then, he who is the King of Kings knew what he was getting into and was willing to do that so that we could have eternal freedom, eternal life. Which chapter 9, again, familiar, the Transfiguration. All right, we don't have to go through it all of it, but it's just a reminder of why Jesus came, and then he had God the Father's approval. When else did he get God the Father's approval? At his baptism, right? This is my Son whom I love, with him I am well pleased. Transfigured, changed, in this case, into a glorious state. It was an opportunity to reassure Jesus, you're on the right track. Also then the witnesses that saw it. Again, a reminder of who Jesus is and why he came. Bless you. So what was the... on 2 to 13, the last question in that section, why would the statement rising from the dead puzzle these disciples? What were they not expecting of Jesus even though they heard it from him before? What was it?
Didn't make sense to me.
It didn't make sense because they're thinking Messiah, they're thinking earthly Messiah, right? We're going to reign with him here on earth. And he's thinking, that's not what I'm here for. So to them, they still weren't expecting that Messiah to suffer and die. And Jesus is preparing them time and time again that he will suffer and die. And he takes those 3 disciples, and they're the ones who are going to have to teach the other disciples. This is why he came, to suffer and die. He takes that small group and expands it from there. Sometimes our expectations of God can be the same. God acts in a certain way which we don't expect him to act. Like allowing tribulation, heartache, disasters to impact our world. And sometimes we ourselves will struggle with, man, God, you're a loving God, but this seems harsh. That fire destroyed innocent people. But who of us really is innocent, right? And God can use that again as a time to deliver the faithful, to judge those who are unfaithful, and a wake-up call for the rest of us. That this is all temporary. Then in verses 14 and following, the healing with a boy and an evil spirit. Jesus, this is where the adult leaves the room. Jesus is gone by a short time, and what happens even when he is absent? What do the disciples fight over? Who's the greatest, right? Jesus. So they have a dispute amongst themselves, and one of the teachers of the law and large crowds gathered together, definitely like sheep without a shepherd. Why were the disciples not able to drive out the evil spirit? What do you think? Not enough faith? Faith in what particular? Yeah, in Jesus' power. Right? Something they just kind of took for granted, perhaps. Hey, we drove out some demons before. We could do this one out. But not realizing, again, where the power comes from to do that. And also, like Jesus, right? He didn't need to go to his Father first to drive out demons, but the disciples did. They needed to go to Jesus and their Heavenly Father. And how does the earthly father here, in this case, show that he has his wits? And regarding his son, he begs for pity. Right? And what words of the Father does Jesus pick up on? And why was this the case? Conditional word. If you can do this. So Jesus picks up on that. And so then in response, what do you appreciate about the Father's response? Verse 24. What was it? Full-throated, right? Lord, I do believe, help me overcome my unbelief. That's a phrase for all of us, right? Lord, I do believe by the grace of God, but I still got plenty of room to grow. And that kind of fits in with our tagline, right? We're here to glorify God and to continually grow in his grace so that we can go with his gospel. What truth does Jesus once again drive home to his disciples? That he would be betrayed, suffer, die, and rise again. They should not be shocked when it does happen. In the next section, 33 and following, what were the disciples arguing about? Again, who is the greatest? And how did Jesus respond to the topic of their argument?
Everyone wants to be first, got to be last.
Yeah, whoever wants to be first needs to be last. Whoever's last will be first. Bottom line, first of all, knock it off. Right? You're not focused on the important things. Practice humility. Being first is not the concern.
But after 3 years with it, it's killer.
And how many of us who have been with him 40 years still are caught up with, it's about me, right? And the use of a child as a reference point. A child, we kind of view children as being innocent, right? So that view, right? And because of that, right, some people say, well, children are gullible, so yeah, right? But that's not his point there. That childlike faith, trusting, right? Having that innocence about them. As we get older, we become more cynical, and we tend to look down on others. Which then leads to the next section. What concerned the disciples now? Someone out of the group able to drive out demons, especially when some of them were able to do before. They can't get that out of their head. And what did the 12 disciples have a lock on? A power from God.
Only that they can do
Yeah, only they could do that, right? 42, Jesus goes back again, talks about these little ones, which could be either young in age or young in faith, or it could mean both. It's open there. What would be considered a sin someone young in faith could be led into? Yeah, the whole work righteousness, good works save. Holding on to traditions rather than Christ himself. And then how do we know that Jesus is taking this very seriously? Because he says that person should be... Like, how could a loving Jesus say this? Could a person be drowned with a millstone around his neck? I mean, talk about cement shoes, right? That's how serious he was about that. And then again, the whole point of the salt thing, to preserve, to flavor. In some parts of the country, they use it to provide safety on the roads. So the importance then of drowning the old Adam, whatever it is, a sin for you, don't continue as possible to be surrounded by that sin, which could lead to some tough choices. Maybe it's the workplace, which is leading you into sin. Maybe it's a relationship. What do I do in those cases? What is something that Jesus wants for us, ultimately? Peace with God, right? Have faith in him. And to be at peace with others. And so, in other words, to help with that, he wants us to be connected to him, to stay connected to him, and to be salty people. How much salt are you giving off?
That's how, so you're talking about how, I mean, 'cause it seems like you should be able to say things like, you should do something wrong, you should be a millstone tied around your neck. It seems like we should be able to say stuff like that that affect people. But just, you can't. And then you can argue with people and just, well, it starts in grammar school. Kids start their mind to be, it's a different worldview.
Yeah, the worldview is important. So yeah, Christian education, if they're in public school, hopefully the home is then feeding them what they need so that they can be a witness, even if they can't do it in school, but outside of school, maybe they can still be a witness. Again, Jesus doesn't surprise us in the fact that we can share the gospel with people and people will not believe it, but other times we'll share it and they do believe. And we get praise for that. Just real quick, and there's something to further think about in the last minute here. Fire is never satisfied. Compare that thought with sin. What's meant by that? Fire is never satisfied. It spreads rapidly, right? If you're given a chance, it will continue to burn. Sin, if given a door, it will continue to spread. And the last comment there, the jargon of the philosophy of progress taught us to think that the savage and primitive state of man is behind us. But barbarism is not behind us. It is within us. Which fits with the words before us and the readings for today and Paul's words in 2 Timothy about the godlessness that's taking place in the last days. Nothing new under the sun. Given that's the case, it goes back to the beginning. Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel because it's the power source. And focusing in on Psalm 1, Lord, help me meditate on your word day and night. So blessings on your Sunday and Labor Day and being salty people throughout the week. Thank you.
Salt the open prison.